Hello and welcome to another episode of Fire 5 at Phoenix. I think this is the penultimate one. Actually, no, this might be I think we've got 3 more left of this season. So if you haven't caught an episode before, it's very simple. We have a topic, a guest, and 5 unseen questions. So our topic today is the mind and body connection, and my guest is Emma Nesta from Love Your Voice, a vocal coach. And she's going to introduce herself very shortly. But if you are joining us live, do feel free to join the conversation. If you are listening or watching back, feel free to add questions or comments in, and I will keep my eye on them and come back to them. Let me introduce the guest. Actually, let me get the guest to introduce themselves. Emma Lou, thank you for joining me today. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Zoe, for having me on today. Absolute pleasure. And hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Emma Nesta, and I am a Love Your Voice coach. And what that means is I help people learn to love their voices through transformational coaching and vocal exercises, performance coaching, that kind of thing. There we are. Oh, okay. So a little bit about how I got into it is I was working with singers. I was a singer myself, and I lost my voice when I was 21. I had to rehabilitate my voice and learn how to speak and sing again. Over the years, I've worked with more and more people, helping them do what I did, and working with singers, all ages, all abilities. And now I work with speakers, so entrepreneurs, people who want to speak more online, people who want to explore their voice and speak more confidently. And what I've learned over the years, the same with singing, is people just love to vocalize. They love to share their message. They love to speak. They love to sing. But people generally don't like the sound of their own voice. So in this modern tech day, we are asked to share our message more online and speak up, and people are holding back. And it can be really transformational once people get to know themselves on a deeper level, understand that their voice matters, understand that the feeling of vocalizing and all of that stuff. So I'm so passionate about it. I love seeing the transformations in people. And you and I have worked together quite a bit on this sort of stuff now, haven't we? And
yeah.
It is just such an amazing, amazing journey, just seeing people just come out of themselves, really,
And it is just so important, isn't it? And I this is why I prefer live videos and live contact rather than the pre-recorded stuff that you have to then sit and watch back or listen back. But it is important, and it is important to find that confidence to be able to tell your story or talk about what it is that you do. And yeah, there's a lot of people that really struggle with that. So it's good that you mentioned that it's not just about the singing, it's about that confidence to speak too. So I love that. Yeah. So I'm intrigued as to what your questions will be today in terms of the mind-body connection and how we use our voices with that as well. Or maybe they're not. Let me not preempt. Let you ask the questions, and we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yes, fabulous. So, what do we do next?
When you are ready, you hit me with the first question, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
And I'll try and sit still because I have a very squeaky chair. So I'm going to try and sit still because I'm a bit of a fidget. So I will try and sit still, and we'll go from there.
Go from there. Brilliant. Okay. Well, first of all, let's set the scene. And I just wondered how you would describe the mind, body, and soul connection.
Okay, how would I describe it? I think it is all interlinked. I think what we say to ourselves has a huge impact physically, mentally, emotionally. So just the internal conversations, the conversations that nobody else ever hears, has a huge impact. And I think certainly from my perspective and the work that I do, that internal conversation is almost where it all begins. And I think if we can tap into the mindset, into those internal conversations, then physically, mentally, emotionally, you can see things start to kind of fall into place for people. But it does start with that internal conversation. And I think a lot of people, I was going to say underestimate, but I don't think that's the right word. I think perhaps don't know or don't realize how big an impact the things that we say to ourselves and even the things that we say out loud in jest can have an impact on our confidence, on our self-esteem, but also physically as well. You know, I'd speak to a lot of people where there are very genuine physical illnesses, physical ailments, chronic stress, anxiety, all of these things that have a physical response. And quite often, you know, there's a big part of the mindset and our mental and emotional health that has an impact on our physical health as well. So I think, you know, they are all intrinsically linked. And I think physical health can impact mental emotional health, and mental and emotional health can impact physical health as well. And, you know, it's Mental Health Awareness Week, so this is a great topic to be able to talk about, because everybody's going to be talking about these kind of things this week to hopefully increase the awareness. But certainly, you know, chronic stress, a lot of that comes down to mental and emotional health that leads to that chronic stress as well. So I think it's all very intrinsically linked. And I think a lot of people work on the physical. I think, you know, we have, I mean, the last time I did a podcast on this topic was this time last year, you know, and we talked then that, you know, the awareness of the importance of physical health is really important and is really well known. I think most people know that looking after ourselves physically is really important. And there's an increasing awareness on our mental health, looking after our mental health, and, you know, seeing it like we see looking after our physical health, that we have to do things on a regular basis that help us to maintain our mental health in the same way that we maintain and look after our physical health. And I think emotional health is now starting to creep into those conversations as well, you know, recognizing that our emotions and our emotional health also has a significant impact. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, beautifully.
From your perspective and the work that you do, how much do you notice of those with that connection?
Oh gosh, you know, people come, so for example, if someone's coming, they've got a performance in mind, a speaking engagement or a singing performance, or they're just doing it for fun. You know, they come along and they think we're just going to do arduous exercises to build up the vocal stamina. But I use something called a confidence star with people. So it's affirmations, they're written on a mirror. So they're looking at themselves, because, and we don't just say it once, we say it 3 to 5 times. And it works beautifully on children as well. And you see just the body just relax. So when someone's, you know, speaking to themselves, like you say, what's being put into the mind first. If you're saying, I'm going to be really rubbish at this, I'm not going to be very good, or I can't do that, or my voice can't do that. I hear that a lot. My voice doesn't do that. My voice just does this. You know, saying things like that, I can only do this, I can't do that. People's brains aren't being opened up to the possibilities, and the body doesn't open up to the possibilities of what can be achieved. And then that leaves you feeling low and leaves you feeling, you know, and that's kind of a bit of a surface level. But I imagine what you're saying about, you know, these ailments. So repeatedly over time, this is going to cause, you know, what we say to ourselves causes physical illness and ailments and you know, traumatic experiences can do, like you say, and there's lots of different exercises and things that we can do daily, even if it's just the tiniest little thing, you know, then I notice that. And it's interesting because since I've been working with a different group of people, as in not performers, other people who wouldn't class themselves as performers per se, they've really noticed a change in the way that they view themselves and the way that they carry themselves and their well-being and the way that they're viewing the world and their world, you know. So yes, this mind, body, soul, for me, before I explored it, was more of a kind of a saying, like a back in the day kind of,
Yeah.
Body, soul, but not really really understanding what it meant. It kind of reminds me of the body form advert that did then. You know, it's like free but mind, body, soul thing, but it's deeper than that. It's powerful, and like you say, if it's all interlinking, it's just an incredible concept.
Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference, and I think people. I would say a lot of people start with the external stuff, the stuff that they can see, because it, you know, and I guess that makes sense. It's common sense to a point. You start with what is tangible, what you can measure, what is easy. You know, you look at SMART objectives, and you know, it's much easier to start with some of those external things. But actually, I think you need to go back the step to see what's generating those feelings and those responses, and start there. That's certainly my take on it.
Your take, yeah. Should we move on to the next question? So the next one moves on really nicely, actually, which is, with this interconnection, how do we know when one is out of balance?
So it's definitely a feeling, isn't it? It's that out of sync feeling. It's interesting, as I talk a lot with people about values and how sometimes it's not always obvious when our values are out of alignment, but we know that something isn't right. We know that something is off. So I guess with the mind-body connection, it's very similar. You know something isn't right. It doesn't feel as it has done, but you might not always be able to put your finger on what is out of sync. Interestingly, when I did a talk last week on stress, overwhelm, and burnout, and one of the things that I was talking about was getting that clarity over what good looks like. I think we all have a pretty good sense of what we are like when we are in good health, mentally, physically, and emotionally. When we're in good health, we have a good idea of what that looks like, and we have a good idea of what we need to do to achieve it and to maintain it. And we also probably have a pretty good idea of what it looks like when we're not in a good health, in like mentally, physically, emotionally. So when I talk about health, I'm talking about all three. And we probably have a pretty good idea of what that looks and feels like. But there's this gap in the middle where we go from good health and it starts to deteriorate into poor health. And we're not always clear of what those signs are. And also being able to share that with other people of what those signs are like, because it's much easier to spot these things in other people than it is to spot them in ourselves. So one of the things that I was saying to people last week is map that out, write out what does good mental, physical, and emotional health look like for you. What do you notice? What does that feel like? What does that look like? What do you do? So the actions that you take on a regular, consistent basis to help maintain that. And then also, what does poor health look like for you? And what do you notice when things are starting to deteriorate? Is it that you stop doing some of those things? Is it that maybe you start doing something else that you stop doing when you're in good health? What are the signs that you notice that means that things are starting to deteriorate? And how can you share that with the people that are around you, so that you can say to people, when you're in a good place, you can have those conversations with the people that are closest to you, the people who are going to want to be able to help and support you. How can you let them know what you need them to look out for, and also to share with them what support and what help you want from them when they notice that starts to happen? So do you start to withdraw? Do you start to disengage? Do you become less social? Do you stop going out? Do you stop maybe going and exercising? Do you maybe drink a little bit more? Do you maybe eat a little bit more? Or maybe it's the opposite, you eat or drink a little bit less. But when we can have those conversations with people who are closest to us, we can say, look, this is what I want you to keep your eye out for. And when you notice this, this is how I want you to help me pick it back up again. And if we have those conversations when we're in a good place, it's much easier to accept those when we're not. But I think the challenge is that we don't always notice that difference. Other people might notice a shift from our norm to something different. And we might notice a shift that things are starting to feel better, but these aren't always, tangible, measurable things. Sometimes there is an indication. Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's just noticing those changes. And it's that mood change of noticing, this is the second weekend I've been quite moody, or this is the second week that I've felt quite tired every day when I've woken up, or this is the second week that I've noticed that my negative chatter is increasing. But we don't necessarily keep a track of that. And so until somebody turns around to us and says, God bloody hell, why you're moody again? We don't always necessarily pick up on it. So I think it's tough, and it's a tough conversation for other people to have with us as well. And that shift is going to be different for different people. So in alignment and out of alignment, for me, could be very different to your in alignment and out of alignment, because we're two different people with different needs and different ways of living. So it's a tough one, and it is a conversation that I end up having with a lot of people, because we have to know ourselves to be able to work that bit out. And we actually don't spend a lot of time getting to know ourselves. Very few people put time aside in their calendars to spend time getting to know themselves. So unless you're actively doing that, you just kind of go through the motions. Makes it more difficult for people to spot. But it is going to be different for different people, and how we want to respond to that and how we want people to support us in responding to that is also going to be different. It's a very long answer to your question.
Oh, that's a couple of moments where I was like, oh, remember this. But certainly I notice in people with voice coaching that they might have a fatigued voice, for example, and can't quite understand why. And it's one of the first places to go when we're stressed, when we're feeling emotionally drained. You don't find that you lose your voice if you've been running all week or going to the gym all week. You find that you lose your voice. Some people say, I've had loads of sleep, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm just really tired. So it is that. Then, are they breathing correctly? Are you breathing deep enough? Are you using deep diaphragmatic breathing? I don't know. Probably not. I've been quite stressed.
Yeah.
Dealing with that level of stress and not even realizing, you're just surviving. You're in that survival mode of trying to get through the week and can't cope with anymore. And it comes out in the voice, and it comes out in how we sound and how we present ourselves to people, which again, and then over time, that again impacts our health, and we lose our lack of purpose, or we lose our lack of sense of being. And I think, like you say, you said about understanding what does good look like. So what you're suggesting is almost deciding what good looks like, or recognizing what good looks like, and then working your way back, and maybe pinpointing times when it gets affected, for example.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So yeah.
We're conscious of habit, so we tend to follow that pattern of behaviour. So the chances are we will do the same thing When we get stressed, we will do the same things when we get tired, unless we are consciously trying to break that pattern of behavior. If we recognize that pattern of behavior isn't helping us and we are consciously working to do something different, we probably do have a pattern there. So it's recognizing what that pattern is and then putting things in place to be able to help break that pattern and consciously bring in those new behaviors and new habits that we are trying to bring in because we know they'll be more helpful.
Yeah, and I know for myself, certainly, if I've been, my goal this year, I'm 40 in June and I'm going hiking next weekend at night time up Snowdon.
Wow. With
200 other people. Now, my fitness had taken a downturn over the years. And I thought, right, this year I'm going to get fit for 40, putting all these high expectations on myself, imagining that I was going to be dropping 2 dress sizes, that sort of thing. But what I've realised is just getting out every week and going on a different walk and visiting different places and just being more comfortable in being outside, away from my phone, walking and just being free. And before I'd go out for a walk every now and then, maybe, a couple of times a month or something. It wasn't weekly or daily. And now I'm like, well, I'm going to do my walk today. I was quite fit before, but just walking alone is just a gift, I feel, for me, for my well-being. If I'm not walking, I'm not breathing properly.
Yeah.
I've not got that space around me. I feel claustrophobic in the house, that kind of stuff. So I know when I'm off balance, going for a walk really does help.
I love walking. I do love walking. I think it makes a big difference. It just connects with so many things, doesn't it? That you get that headspace to be able to think things through, or you can put music on to give yourself that distraction, but fresh air and wide open spaces. Yeah, I do love walking. Oh, good luck with your walk next weekend.
Thank you.
The pictures from that.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Right, okay, number 3. So some say that people who are connected to their soul element have a stronger sense of purpose. How does this impact the body?
I think when we connect with that soul, with spirit, with sense of purpose, to me, then that also connects with values, connects with understanding what our needs are, understanding emotionally what needs need to be met, but from a purpose, intentional. I think we live more intentionally, we live more with purpose when we're more connected to our soul and our spirits. I think when we live more intentionally and we live more purposefully, it feels different. You're not, I was going to say you're not riding the wave, and I'm not sure that's the best metaphor to use, but you're more in control. You're living, you're making the decisions, you're creating that direction, you're setting the pace, you're in control as much as we can be in control of life, but you're making the decisions. It's much more living on your terms, which feels very different to sort of getting caught up in the current and the tide and being dragged through life, which unfortunately is very real for a lot of people. A lot of people are just kind of going where the tide takes them and just kind of trying to keep their head above water. And it is that survival mode of just going where life goes rather than kind of being on top of the wave and kind of surfing, riding it out and being more in control of it. It feels very different. I've definitely lived in both. I've definitely been caught up in the current, and I've definitely kind of found my balance and found what's important and been more in control and been on top of it all. But I think it feels very different. I think it's that chronic stress, isn't it, of when you've got those kind of low level, and they can be low level, and I think that's what a lot of people underestimate, is how low level worrying can have a very significant impact. But when you're not making those decisions when decisions are being made for you, when you don't feel in control, when you aren't kind of setting your own direction, you do worry, you do have those low levels of chronic stress. And survival mode takes up a lot of energy. It's a big energy burner. It's, like these apps that drain your phone in the background. They're not even apps that you are aware that you've logged into. They're just ones that drain the battery in the background that have a significant impact. And for me, that's what survival mode is like. It's like having this app that just drains your battery, and you can have a good night's sleep, but your energy just doesn't do what it needs to do. It's just not enough of it there. So I think it physically feels very different, but also you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's the challenge, isn't it? If you haven't ever really experienced that, it's very hard to know what that might feel like. And I think that's part of the conversations I have with people, is they know what they know, and they're very used to being in survival mode. They know how to survive. They know how to stay in that space. And the thought of things being different or feeling different it's just not on their radar of what that might be like. So it does feel very different. And I think if you've experienced both, then you understand what that looks and feels like. If you haven't, then it's almost quite an alien concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm chuckling inside, because I'm just thinking, I can teeter from one scale to the other. For what reason, I'm still trying to work that out. But, I get so excited, so creative, so on purpose, so want to do this, so want to do that, and then crash.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, this is great. This is where I'm meant to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This feels really right. And then crash. So it's like, where is the balance? So, and it's going back to, I guess, the question before, where you said it's working out what's good, where is that balance? And some people they don't have enough of wanting to be creative and inspired and excited. But I know for a fact, when I am in that state, I've got so much energy.
I think it's paying attention to what energizes and gives you that kind of rejuvenation feeling. What is it that makes you feel alive? What is it that you think, oh God, I could do this all day, every day, even when you know that that's not sustainable, but you think, I would love to be able to do that. It is, I think you've got to pay attention to what drains you, and you've got to pay attention to what energizes you, but also what recharges you as well. Rest is really important, but you need to recharge as well. And for some people, rest does recharge, and for other people, it's more of a rejuvenation activity that recharges. And again, it depends on each individual. A lot of people find resting really hard to do. Yes. But active rest, doing something that feels restful, is much better for them than trying to sit and do nothing. So for some people, that's not rest. That's not restful. It might be rest, but it's not restful for them. So we do really need to pay attention to what charges our battery, what drains it. And when we are getting towards a low battery, we don't want the battery to die and then plug it in and recharge it. We want to ideally, be getting to the end of the day with 10-20% left, and then charging it up overnight and starting the day. But if we're constantly draining it right the way down, do we recharge back to 100 overnight, or is it only getting to 80% overnight? So it's just, there isn't a one size fits all. And, it's great that there's lots of information out there. I think that sometimes has the tendency to confuse people of the things that they should be doing, because that's what everybody else is doing. I should be meditating because that's the answer. Meditating is not for everybody, So for some people, going for a walk is like a meditation. It's a more of an active rest that works a lot better. But just because other people are doing it doesn't mean that that's what's going to work for you. You know, just keep a diary of what energizes, what drains, what helps you to rest, and go with what you know works for you. But you've got to pay attention to it.
Oh, yeah, and I love that, because I remember the first time I tried to meditate and I just burst out crying. And then I was sat there just so uncomfortable, sat in a group, crying. But then I did go to a meditation in Australia, and it was an amazing experience, but I could not sit still. It was just fidget all the way through. However, get me to sing for an hour.
Yeah.
Like 2 minutes have passed. And with some of the students that I work with and the coaches that I work with, and they do singing, and they say, "Well, that was 45 minutes has gone," and they feel energized. And I had my Apple Watch on the other day, 320 calories burnt within that hour, and I wasn't stood completely still, but I wasn't doing an arduous like exercise class or anything like that. So it was just amazing. You know, I felt really woken up, body felt buzzed. The fog had lifted in my brain. It was, you know, it just felt really, really good. And I think that kind of like exercising from inside out.
Yeah.
Mind, body, soul, you know, you're singing, you're feeling great. It's, you know, oh, it's wonderful. I really recommend it. I know we shouldn't say should, but yeah, I definitely recommend people singing more.
Finding things that work for you, isn't it? Meditation, I don't really do, but I love a good sound bath. You know, I've been a couple of times where I've been to a sound bath, and you know, lying out on the floor and just listening to the different sounds. That I love. Whereas I know that other people would not want to do that at all. So yeah, there's I think it's always nice to try new things. I think I wouldn't recommend writing things off until you've given it a go. But you know, there's lots of things out there.
The frequencies in the music do something to the brain.
Yeah.
Change the way we think. So it's not just what we're saying, it's the frequency.
Yeah, if you think music and the vibrations, and that shifts the energy, doesn't it? It changes the energy. And music is so great as an energy shift, and for changing your emotional state. You know, I've got a feel good playlist, which, you know, I've got only songs on there that are almost impossible for me to be grumpy when I hear them. So, and I think, you know, I've got others that help me calm. I've got others that lift my energy. I think music is probably one of the best emotional state changes that are out there. But again, we all have different musical states, you know, musical preferences. So what I would sometimes listen to things and I think, oh, that sounds very angry and very aggressive. For somebody else, it's like, oh no, that's the song that kind of I tap into and lose myself for a couple of minutes in. So again, it's, you know, we're all individuals, and how we need to be is going to be individual to us.
Yeah. Well, next question, which is really great from that conversation, is what activity can we do to connect and maintain mind-body-soul connection?
So I think at the risk of repeating myself, I think it really is down to you. I would say think back into where you have felt that, and what is it about that activity that works for you. And I like to walk, but actually, you know, having been away for a month and not having access to a gym and gym classes, and coming back into the gym, I've realized that actually, you know, those sessions, like a spin class where you're out of breath and you have to focus on what it is that you're doing, I've found, you know, I didn't realize how much I missed those, because walking's great because it gives you thinking time, but actually sometimes it's really quite nice to just go into something and not think about the world and reality for a little bit. And you know, so some of the gym classes really helped me to do that. So I think you just got to find what works for you. and think about what is it that you want. Do you want to rest? Do you want to recharge? Do you want to rejuvenate? And you could probably have 3 different categories of activities for each of those. And then, where are you now? Where is it you're trying to get to? So do you feel tired? Do you need to rest? Or do you feel a bit meh and you want to rejuvenate? Or do you feel that you don't have any energy and you want to recharge? It's what's your current state? What's the state that you want? And you've probably got 3 different types of activity that work for you, that help you to shift from the present state to the state that you do want, that future state. But know what works for you. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. You go with what works for you. And if that means dancing around in your kitchen or doing 10 squats while the kettle's boiling, you do what works. Do what works for you. Don't worry about anybody else.
That's a good idea. I heard about doing the exercises in between the adverts, but we don't really watch programs with adverts anymore, do we?
Well, they don't exist anymore, do they? With everything as it's set up now. Yeah, I am. Sometimes I'll just do a little bit of a stretch while I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, or I'll get up and change location, change my environment. That quite often helps change state. But you've got to find what works for you. Because what works for me might not work for other people. So got to find what works for you.
Sometimes going and getting a Snickers bar works for me. I don't eat chocolate very often.
I've had a Snickers bar for a long time.
I'm going to go and get a Snickers bar.
I like cooking, and I have on several occasions gone and baked a cake just because just like, okay, I need to take a break. I don't want to do housework. I haven't got time to go to the gym, or there's not enough time to be able to do that, and I go and make a cake.
Well, my daughter is getting anxious about up and coming events that might happen in her life, and she said, "Mum, what will you do when this happens?" And I said, "I'll make a cake and we'll celebrate." And I say, "Congratulations." She's like, "What?" I said, "Well, it's a positive thing, we'll celebrate." So I could see the anxiety just creeping up inside of her, and she was, fearing about, what am I going to do when this changes in my life and I change this.
One of my favourite questions when people talk about what's scaring them, what's exciting them, what's scaring them or what's making them anxious is, but what excites you about that?
Yeah.
Flip the switch. Good question.
Switch. I love that. And that's what I do with again, the voice coaching is, you see the transformation happen teeny tiny, because you're just asking them little questions along the way of what would happen if you didn't say that, or what would happen if you did do this.
Yeah.
Oh, and then it's just like teeny tiny little steps, and I'm hearing that consistency is really important. So,
the what if is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because you can ask what if with 2 different tones, and it asks 2 different questions.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? Yeah, but what if this happens? It's exactly the same question, but just that different tone of what if. What if this happens, but also what if this happens makes a big difference.
Defo. How are you feeling right now in terms of your mind, body, soul?
As in today, in this moment? Well, I went to the gym just before this, so that always puts me in a good place. Although, having had a month off for the gym and then come back and done some spin classes and some weight classes, a little bit sore, and getting up and out of the chair, even just lifting my arms at the moment is a challenge. But I've missed it. I've missed that feeling. It's a very different feeling, isn't it? You don't necessarily get from walking. But things are in a good place. We talk about things being in alignment and energy levels and balance, and the work-life balance is in a good place. the things that I'm doing to, it's always the challenge, isn't it, when you run your own business, because you have to do everything pretty much. There's always things that you don't really want to do, but that's all in a good place in terms of balance, energy levels with people in a good place. I think it would be very easy to kind of sail through this and not take notice of it and not appreciate it, because there's bound to be something at some point that will kind of probably put a bit of a spanner in the works, because that's how life goes, isn't it? So I think it is really important to take notice when things are good. So I'm actually really glad you asked that question, because things are good. I'm just come back from a month away. I've had lots of sunshine, but now the sun's shining here. That always makes a big difference, doesn't it? But just being able to line things up and shape life how I want life to be makes a big difference. So it's probably shaped some of my answers today, in fairness. But it's a good question, and I think it can be really easy to sail through when things are easier and not notice what is it that we're doing that is making things easier, and what are we doing that makes things better, because we need to take notice when we're doing that, because these are the things that quite often we stop doing that then let things slide. So
and I always like to ask and sit and just take a few moments just to feel if something's, say, bothering me or on my mind, and I just take a few moments just think, where is that sitting in my body currently?
Yeah.
Where's the sensation? And just being really mindful of, saying hello to it, or what's that about then? And trying to shift it and move it on, because we all know that we can store trauma and stress in our body, and it can come out in other ways. And I know for me, the downward spiral comes quite quickly these days. I was far more resilient in my 20s than I have been in my 30s, and I'm now going into my 40s. I don't know, I might have a newfound strength that I've found through this self-awareness, but it's just that, isn't it? It's that self-awareness of, okay, feeling in my body, because I numbed my whole body. I went through traumatic experience, birthing experience. My daughter was stillborn just before I turned 30, so it's 10 years ago. And I was really strong and resilient, and I built a business, and I was doing really well. And then I got pregnant again and had my son. I had my daughter, my son, and I was like this machine. And people were like, wow, you're amazing, you're amazing. But I felt nothing in my body. I didn't tell anyone. And there's only so long that you can do that in your physical being. Is, I was on purpose. I was helping people. I was building businesses. I was helping people in well-being. I was training. I was being a great mum. I was ticking all the boxes, but my body was numb. It was dead to the world. I didn't feel anything. I couldn't listen to music for so long. I felt nothing. It didn't give me that joy that it gave me for so long. So on the outside, people genuinely thought, wow, I don't know how you do it. And often I think when we see people like that, we do need to check in with those people, because every one of us is dealing with things, like you say, in our own way.
Yeah.
And even the strongest of people have these mind, body, or soul situations but over a long period of time, that's really detrimental to our mental health. And for me, I got to the point where I was forced to look into this, and that's why I introduced the coaching world into what I was doing, even though I was touching on it before. So I understand the importance of what you do, life and wellbeing coaching, and how that can transform our awareness, our lives, and and just give us that gift of, how am I feeling today?
Yeah. And it's interesting, what you're saying there, and I see that in a lot of people take on, but the acceptance and let go is just as important, because we can only carry so much. So it's great to bring in lots of positives when, you know, because that can have a big impact. It can have a very positive impact. We have to accept and let go of the uncomfortable, the negative, the trauma, those experiences, because we can't carry all of that and keep taking on as well. So yeah, so important.
Yeah, I've got a lovely poem that I'm going to dig out and I'll post in the thread, and I'll share it because it's all about letting go. It's a really lovely poem. I'll share it.
Oh, nice, thank you.
But, that wasn't my final question, actually.
Okay.
Have we got time for another one?
Yeah, go on. I haven't had many guests that haven't sneaked in an extra one, so I've got, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, go on.
Question. So, what can we do to support our children to embrace this awareness?
Oh, I'm glad you still ask, because that's such an important question. And, you know, I think we're recording this in what's beginning of the GCSE week. Exam season is upon us. People have, you know, our young people have got to make decisions about next steps. And I'm certainly getting a few more inquiries at the moment from people, and it is twofold. It's from the parents who want to support their young people, and from young people who are looking for support. So really, really important question. I think listen, observe, notice. Don't assume that you know more or you know better. Just because we have some life experience, we don't have their experience. I'm really just picking up on what I said earlier. You know, what works for us might not work for them. So I think we really need to just sometimes listen, take notice, and give them the space. Our young people, I would say, are more resourceful than sometimes we give them credit for. And actually, sometimes they do know the answers. They do know what it is that they need. They just need some support and space to give them time to work that out. So it's that coaching ethos, isn't it? It's giving people the space, listening to them, trusting that they know themselves better than we. I mean, I think as parents, we know our children pretty well. Doesn't mean we know everything. And just because we are the parents doesn't mean that we have all of the answers, or even that we have to find the answers. I think sometimes, you know, empowering our young people to find the answers themselves can help them to build that resilience and help them to feel more comfortable and confident in tackling life's challenges. We can't take it off them all the time. And I think we know we want to, absolutely, we know we want to, but we can't. And actually, it doesn't always help them to be able, you know, for us to roll our sleeves up and take the problems off them doesn't necessarily help them. It doesn't help them to learn how to tackle challenges, and it doesn't help them to build their resilience, which is tough. You know, it's, I think, probably one of the toughest things about parenting is not being able to pick them up and make it all better. We have to help them to learn how to pick themselves up and make it better, because that's the tools that they need as a young adult and as an adult. So I think, you know, I think if I've learned anything from parenting, sometimes just sit and listen and give them the space. And if they tell you they're not ready to talk about it, just say, okay, well, I'm here when you are, and not force it, and just listen to what's not being said as much as what is being said. But trust them. You know, I think sometimes that's hard, of, you know, wanting to find the answers. And I think sometimes we have to trust them that they will find the answers themselves, that we are there to support and guide, but not necessarily to fix. And I think that's part of the challenge sometimes, is that we feel that responsibility as a parent, that we have to find those answers and we have to fix and we have to make it better. And yeah, it's tough. It is a tough one, but I think the more we can give them tools and resources, that, you know, the more tools they put in their toolbox over the years, the more we are equipping them to deal with life. And that is hard. It is hard sometimes because we've got all of the tools in our toolbox and we know exactly which tool to use, but do we? Whereas actually when we are more patient with it and we give them time to learn what tools they have, what tools they can use and what tools they need, we're equipping them a lot better for the longer term.
Yeah. And that word trust, just trusting your instincts, just trusting how you're feeling right now, and just work from there.
Yeah.
And like you say, giving that time, that space. When is it time to kind of move in on that, though?
I think that's the challenge, isn't it? I think it's asking the question, trying to ask really open questions. What do you need from me? What can I do to support you? What does that look like? What can I do differently? What am I doing that's helping? What can I do that would be even better? So it's not about a right or wrong. And if you've got more than one child, the chances are you've got to be a different parent to all of your children, and all of your children will need you to be a different parent, and what a good parent looks like will be different for all of them. So that's why I stopped at one, because that kept it simple. I worked it out for the one and stuck with it, but you got more. And you've got a blended family too, so it's that challenge of, I think, just really open questions. What can I do to support you? What does good support look like for you? What do you need from me? What can I do to help? And my son's 21 now, and I still ask the same questions. And sometimes I say, it sounds like you've got a good handle on this. What can I do to support? And quite often he'll just say, no, I'm good. I'll let you know if that changes. And other times he's like, actually, can you do this? And sometimes he's like, actually, can I just have a little bit of space to think it through, and I'll come and chat with you when I think I've got it sorted out. So it's not always the same answer every time either. So I think you've just got to just ask them, what do you need? What does that look like? What does good look like? It's very similar to managing questions, isn't it? Parenting and management is very similar of, not everybody needs the same thing in the same way. And actually, sometimes that changes too. So knowing, it's difficult knowing when to step in, because my gut feeling, and again, this is based on my parenting experiences, I've stepped in when I've been asked to step in. And certainly once he got to a certain age where I've been comfortable that he has enough to be able to make that decision, or I've said, actually, I think I need to step in now, and then have the conversation about what stepping in looks like.
Yeah. And I think, from what I'm experiencing right now, we've got four all under 11, and it's getting that balance of, are they getting out, being physical enough? Are they moving enough? We go out as a family, we play softball. We did that all afternoon one day, and gosh, there's me thinking I can dash running back and forth. I was aching so much just from even batting the ball, but it was such great fun, and it was like we had a great time. We were cheering each other. Some of them, some of them can't handle losing, and it's like, oh, I didn't, okay. And it's those tiny moments of just giving them their empowerment of being like, stop, pause, and just resetting themselves in those moments, key moments where those habits, or those habitual thinking, or telling yourself you've been rubbish, or those unhealthy traits that we might have. And it's those key moments of being together and around people where it really impacts how we feel about ourselves. It impacts how physical we're being, and I think we put a lot of this onto us and what we have to do in our own time, in our own space, but actually being in groups and being around friends and being around family, or anyone that, I make new friends all the time, or I meet new people all the time. And I just think we can learn so much from one another. and transfer that energy and, you know, all of those things. It's the same with kids. So, and kids are learning every day, just as we are. I always say to the kids, I'll tell you everything I've learnt, but when there'll come a point you'll be telling me, and I won't have anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
I think fun is really important. I think there's, to balance it all out, life, you know, adulting is pretty serious and life gets pretty serious. The fun is really important. Being able to laugh and have a joke about things is really important. But I think also acknowledging that that's how they feel. And it's not, you know, every emotion is okay. How you respond to that emotion is what then becomes important. But I think not being dismissive of how they feel, not, you know, I think help, you know, not trying to rush them out of that emotion, but helping them to work out how to move from that emotion into the emotion that they want. For them to learn how to change their state is really important, because we're not always going to be there.
No,
we're
exactly.
always going to be there to be sitting next to them, to help them regulate their emotions and help them to change that emotional state. And so sometimes that's sitting with them and acknowledging, you know, accepting that that's how they feel, and helping them to work out how best to move on is also really important. There's so much, isn't there? There's so much as a parent. Does it ever end? Does it ever end? I don't think it ever stops. And you're right. At some point, we learn. Well, I think all the way through, we learn as much from them as they learn from us. But things never stop learning, and always make space for fun is definitely really important.
The biggest thing I've learned from my son, he used to have these outbursts, and I'm sure lots of parents can relate, but they were so out of hand. It stopped me going out at one point. But so what I did was the same as what I said earlier, was where does it start? Where do you feel it in your body?
Mm-hmm.
It was about sort of 3, 4 at this age, 5, probably 5 by the time he kind of grasped it. But we used to call it a power story. And he started telling the story of where it started and where it would go and how it would come out. And he was just like following it through all the time. And we laugh about it now. We have a giggle and a joke. And he says, but Mum, it really did help me learn to stop it before it came and accept it. And like you said earlier, let go.
Yeah.
I learned so much from that, because, you know, I'm not the most easiest of going people of all time, you know. I'm sure lots of us aren't. There's times when I'm like, you know, you've got to let it out, haven't you? Real talk. You've got to let it out.
Yeah, absolutely. But they have to, it's finding appropriate ways to let it out, isn't it? And let's face it, not all adults have got that worked out either. And I think we all have moments where we're like, ooh, okay, that's not how that should have gone. But it is important. Emotions are there. We're not ever going to be able to stop them. We just have to learn how to manage them rather than them manage us. And that's part of growing up, isn't it? Of working out what works for us and what doesn't. I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think it's a really important one. And I think especially, I say at the moment because we're in exam season, but I think it's probably quite a common struggle for a lot of people who are parents, but also for managers too. You know, if you've got a member of staff that struggles with that, then it's similar with a member of staff as well, isn't it? So great final question. Great, all of them were great questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been great to have you on. So we will put your details in so that people can find you. I already put your website and link in. So if you check out the details of today's episode, Emma's details are all in there. If you are struggling to love your voice, get in touch with Emma and see what she can support you with. But if you've got any questions as you're listening or watching back, feel free to pop them in the comments. I'll keep my eye on them and answer. But it was great to have you on. I can't believe this is episode 13, so we've still got another couple left before we wrap up this season, but we'll be back again next month with another topic, another guest, and 5 more questions. But that's a wrap for today. Thank you, Emma, for joining me.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great questions and a great conversation, and we will be back again soon.